better always to enjoy applause before than after.
Mr. Ghosn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I would like to open by asking you how you approach leadership, strategy, and execution differently at Nissan versus at Renault, given that each company has very different cultural contexts.
Well, you know, the French way of managing and the leadership in French expresses itself in a completely different terms than in Japan. I mean, I knew it from the beginning. So in a certain way, you have some fundamentals which are the same. Mm-hmm. And we're going to probably talk about what are these fundamentals. But the way you exercise these fundamentals are completely different. In Japan, I don't run meetings the same way that I run them in France. I don't reward people the same way than I do it in France. What is expected, even in terms of communication, you don't do the same things in Japan. The tools are not the same. The words are not the same. The way even you shape your strategy is not the same. So what we have to do when you are in a situation where you are managing through different culture is you want to make sure about what is the content, which usually is very common, and then what is the packaging of the content, which has to take in consideration the culture. And I can tell you that, I mean, we're talking about France and Japan, but it's varied between the United States or China or India. Every time you have to make the difference about what's the content, what do I need to do, what is the essence of my message, and second, you know, what is the best way, what is the most efficient way to make this message go through.
Great. When you joined Nissan in 1999, the company had been suffering from major losses over the past 7 years, and only 3 of its 48 models were profitable. You turned the company around and restored it to profitability within 2 years. As both the company outsider and the first foreign CEO of the company, how did you earn the support of your team and motivate them to execute on your plan?
Yeah. Well, you know, 1999, the situation was really bad in Nissan. And when you are, you know, taking a responsibility for a situation which is bad, it's also a strength because you don't need to explain to people that situation is bad. They know it already. They know it. And you need to know also that the solution is always here. You don't have to look, I mean, you don't need to invent the solution. You know that people know already that it's bad. And second, that the solution exists, but it's buried inside the company. So your job is very simple in a certain way, is just make sure that you make the very lucid diagnosis of the situation. Very lucid, no emotion, no you know, sugar coating, no politics, no complacency. Extremely lucid assessment of the situation, and listen to what people have to say to a very simple question: why are we in this situation? What do you think can we improve? What are the things that should be done? Then you have your own personal doing about what are the priorities, because you end up with a laundry list of measures that needs to be done. And obviously you cannot work on 120 objectives or on 200 objectives. You need really to concentrate them into 2 or 3, because that's the only thing you can absorb at the level of a big organization. Make sure they are the right one and start to work on them. So, you know, in Nissan, in 1999, everybody knew that Nissan had a problem. The only thing is that nobody recognized that the problem was in his own area. You know, if I was in sales, I was blaming the product planner that they were not able to come with a car competitive with Toyota. If I was in the product planner, I say, well, I have a great product, but the design is not good. The designer said, well, the engineers are messing up with me. So everybody, in a certain way, felt good about what they were doing, but the company had the problem. So you need to change this by saying, okay, we understand that the other guys are not doing the job, but what we want from you is what you can do, you know, in your own area, even if you think it's not very important, what you can do in your own area in order to solve the problem. So, lucid diagnosis, no complacency, finding the bits of solution inside the company, put them in perspective, put them into priorities, put it in a way which is attractive, you know, because what is management about? Management, and particular leadership, is asking people to do things that they don't want to do. That's it. That's management. No, I mean, you don't manage in a situation where everything is okay. You know, that's not management. That's supervision. That's administration, etc. What's real management and leadership? You're going to ask. You're going to have. Okay, say people don't want to cut headcount. They don't want to restructure. They don't want to, close down plants. They don't want to retreat from markets where they've been for many years. They don't want to stop some activities. They don't want to sell assets. They don't want to do that. Okay? So the very simple question of management is, how do you bring them to do this and keep their motivation and being convinced that they're doing the right thing? That's management and that's leadership. And for this, the basic element is put it in perspective. Give yourself an objective that everybody says, oh, that's what we want to achieve. So it helps them go through the tough situation where they will do things that they don't want to do, but they know it's for the right thing. And this is the Nissan story. That's exactly the Nissan story. You know, when I arrived in Japan in 1999, one of the reasons for which Nissan was in trouble is there were a lot of decisions which needed to be taken 5 years ago were not taken. But a lot of people used to tell you, you know, you are in Japan, you cannot close down a plant, you cannot reduce headcount, you cannot undo cross-shareholding, you cannot touch the keiretsu, you cannot touch the seniority system, you cannot do. I mean, a lot of things that nobody wanted to touch. So there was absolutely no way you're going to fix the company without touching all these taboos. So we start to say, okay, look, are we all committed to say we're going to come back to profit and we're going to grow this company again? Yes, no doubt. Unanimity. Okay. Let's commit to this. We all commit to this and say, okay, now we're going to start to explain what is the road. And as you know, the Nissan Revival Plan challenged every single taboo because we've done everything which was forbidden and people said you would not be able to do, but with clear commitment to return to profitability within the first year of the plan. So that's the way you drive people, you know. That's what management is about. Put in front of them something that they want really to do, to achieve, that is really significant for them. Significant for them not only theoretically, but pragmatically they are connected with this victory, that they are proud of having revived the company, but it was good for them, for their salary, for their career, for their compensation, for their stock options, for their benefits, for their retirement, for everything. Then after you align this, okay, now we say, now we have to do the job.
At the end of this year, you are planning to launch the Nissan Leaf, an electric vehicle that uses lithium-ion battery technology and will be one of the early zero-emission cars on the market. Incidentally, as part of our first-year curriculum, we watched the movie Who Killed the Electric Car? And I understand that you are collaborating with that movie's producers to create a sequel called Revenge of the Electric Car.
It's true. No, it is true. It is true. They are filming that. We spent many hours with them, and they came to Tokyo and they filmed the car, and hopefully it's going to be an interesting one.
Great. What is your strategy for driving adoption and becoming a leader in the electric vehicle market in the US and globally?
Well, you know, first, if you want to innovate, you have to accept from the beginning that a lot of people are going to think that you're a fool, you're playing with shareholders' money, you're taking bets that should not be taken, that this will never work, etc., etc. And that's exactly what we're hearing today. That's exactly what I'm reading today. And it's absolutely unbelievable to see how much short-sighted probably the media and a lot of analysts are about how we understand the situation in which the car industry is. So we decided, after analyzing everything, to say, okay, zero emission is the way to go. It doesn't mean that all the cars are going to be zero emission, but there is a huge and tremendous boulevard for the development of the zero emission cars. And we can spend a lot of time explaining why. But anyway, obviously today we've invested already $6 billion on this project. And people say, well, you know what? If this is not going to be a big success, it's going to be a tremendous weigh on the financial performance of the company. First, I think it's going to be a tremendous success, and I think this is the way of the future, and we can spend a lot of time explaining it. But what I'm going to tell you is that we are in the final phase before the launch. The launch will come by the end of 2010. In fact, it's going to be mass marketed in the United States starting November or December 2010, at the same time in Japan. I understand that we showed the Leaf in Stanford campus. Professor, I think you've driven it. You know, I mean, you have to go into this car, drive it to understand that's real. That's not a kind of enhanced golf cart, where you have this is a real car. And on top of this, the basic assumption is it's affordable, it makes a lot of sense, and we're offering the zero emission as a premium. We're not asking consumer to pay for the zero emission. That doesn't work. You're going to get the zero emission as a premium. So again, you have to have a vision. This vision has to be based on understanding about the dynamics of the market globally. And then you have to pursue this vision, no matter what. You have to build motivation inside your company. This is easy because we're saying, okay, we want to be leader in a technology that is meaningful for the consumer. And all the Nissan people, all the Renault people are buying into it. Then we need to come to the consumer and tell the consumer that's a great product which is affordable. And on top of this, is going to allow you to drive without the guilt of the melting of the icebergs and the change of the seasons and the temperature, etc. And I think it's going to be very powerful. But again, before it starts, there is always a doubt. And now we are in the period of time where a lot of people are throwing at you a lot of stones by saying that's not going to work. And then you have a lot of comments from competitors saying, you're too much bullish, it's not going to work. Well, obviously, what do you want competitors to say? He's in the right direction? I'll say, okay, he's in the right direction. And what is your car? Well, I have no electric car. So what's the situation? I'm absolutely. I mean, we open already in the United States. We open the possibility for people already to be. We want to be on the list for the electric car. We had more than 35,000 people already. And I'm not talking about the fleets. Obviously, Fred Smith from Federal Express and the Postal Services and the electric company, all them want to order the car by the 10,000s. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the people who say, okay, this is a good thing, and we want it to happen, and particularly if you tell me it's going to be at the same price than a regular car, I want to go for it. So I think it's going to be very powerful.
Nissan and Renault have a unique alliance in which Renault has a 44% ownership stake in Nissan. Nissan has a 15% ownership stake in Renault, and you act as CEO of both companies. What are the unique opportunities and challenges of this relationship, and how do you handle conflicting interests between Nissan and Renault?
Well, that's an interesting point. We have been in this alliance for the last 10 years. That means we are probably the two companies with the more sustainable track record in terms of alliances, because practically every single other alliance that happened in our industry was blown away, everything. I remember in 1999, we made the Renault-Nissan Alliance immediately after the Daimler-Chrysler Alliance. Daimler and Chrysler came together, and then Renault-Nissan came together, and then Daimler-Chrysler added up Mitsubishi. And then when the Daimler-Chrysler Alliance came together, and we came together, there were a lot of comments. Daimler-Chrysler this is alliance made in heaven, two very rich and powerful company and attractive brands coming together. They're going to do a lot of things, going to change the world. And when Renault-Nissan came together, say, two mules doesn't make a horse. Wall Street Journal, 1999, I have all the track records, all the media, everything. Okay? Nobody talk about this, but we have everything there. Okay. The two mules started to work, and then the two beautiful people started to work, and at the end of the day, after 10 years, Daimler, Chrysler, Mitsubishi, you know the story, and we're still there. Which means that it's better to be a mule than a horse in the car industry. more resistant to the shocks and to the problem. This is due to the fact that we had a very pragmatic approach. No grandiose scheme of, we're two different and we're going to be one, and all the decisions are going to be taken from one place, and we're going to have a super holding company. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We took the alliance as a marriage between two people. Okay? When two people marry, I know probably some of you are not, but those who have some experience in marriage, nobody wants to become the other. If my wife was telling me we're going to become one, but how about you become like me? I'm not sure I'm going to be very motivated. Exactly, and the reverse, same thing. I'm not going to ask her that. So being different is very important. remaining different is very important. Having common goals, having common strategy, but at the same time have your own autonomy, cultivating things together, but even, I mean, this is very important. Diversity within uniformity, you know, commonality with autonomy. That's the way the world works. That's the way it works. So in a certain way, we try to inspire ourselves from the basic institution of human being, of humankind, by saying we need to make sure that, you know, even for the sake of business sense, we do not violate common sense or human common sense. We need always to maintain the cap. And frankly, the result has been that even though there have been a lot of pressure on me to try to say, why don't you make a merger between the two companies and you don't, you know, get one team, etc. It doesn't work. I cannot make one team of Japanese and French managing a company which would be neither Japanese nor French. I can't. It doesn't work. You know, identity is the basis of motivation. Identity is the basis of success. It's the basis of performance. You need to connect to something. You need to make sure that you're working for your own team, for your own country, for your own, etc. You need to belong somewhere in order to go and conquer the world. If you don't know why you're doing this, you're going to lose your motivation. So we have been following this very pragmatic approach. Obviously, there have been a lot of conflicts. There have been a lot of difference. But every time came back to this common sense about, you know, if there is no win-win, we don't do it. We're not going to force one decision from one company to the other. Decisions for Japan, for Nissan being taken in Tokyo always. Decisions for Renault always taken in Paris. Don't confuse the two companies, but at the same time, always push for more synergies, developing things in common, putting things in common, always for the sake of each company benefit. If you maintain this kind of culture, extracted not from any book because there is no reference, but extracted from common sense, you can go very far. And frankly, I think because Renault and Nissan and Japan and Japanese people and French people are so different that it was obvious for everybody. When you start to see that, oh, you know, maybe the two companies are very similar, we're going to merge them together. Now here comes trouble, because there are multiple identities within each company, and if you don't respect them, you're going to be in trouble. That's why there was absolutely no merger which worked in the car industry. All of them are being sold or collapsed. You know, look at Saab being sold and Jaguar being sold and Chrysler. Look what happened with Chrysler after the grandiose story that we have been told in 1999. I mean, you have every single example which happened. It was not respected, and it was not respected because it was violating common sense. We are the only survivor in this, and that's why people say, why? Well, it's a question of time. Yeah, it's a question of time before we start to see problems. No, we're not going to see problems as long as we maintain the same pragmatic, prudent approach to the lines.
How do you identify leadership potential in a person, and how do you attract and develop the best and brightest people in your organization?
That's interesting. There are some basic conditions. That means if you don't see them, forget about leadership. First one, very simple. Very simple. I had my first test, first one. If somebody doesn't listen, no way. Very simple. You sit down with anybody, you know, start discussing, etc. If he's not listening to you, even when you... And the test is you start a boring conversation. But obviously, no, because if you're very interesting, it's very easy for people listening. No. You go for a very boring conversation, you know. And if the person really listens and really tries, etc., that's a very good start. A leader first is a listener. That's absolutely basic condition. If you're not a listener, you're never going to... I mean, you can be a leader, but you're not going to go very far. The second basic also condition is I've never seen such a thing as a boring leader. Nothing. Leader is always somebody interesting, somebody who can connect with you. Very important, very important. I mean, so if I'm sitting with somebody and you know, after 15 minutes I want to go to the next meeting, I know it's not very good. So ability to connect, ability to be interested and being interesting is also a very important feature. And you know that this is something that you don't learn in school or university. It is something that you develop by yourself. Everybody has his own skills, etc. So I would say being a listener, being able to connect with people are two absolutely basic conditions for leadership. For the rest, efficiency, ability to communicate, openness, curiosity, intelligence, etc. That's fine. And we've seen great leaders who are not smart. You probably know a lot of them. They're not smart. They're very common. No, but it's true. They're not smart. And we've seen a lot of people extremely smart who never were able to take any leadership position. So I don't think this is something discriminating. I've never seen a leader who was boring, or at least at the beginning. Maybe boring at the after 5 or never. And somebody who don't listen or observe or try to see, okay, what's the situation in which I am?
What role have mentors played in your life, and what advice do you have for us for finding mentors in our careers? Very important, mentors.
Very important, particularly but what they teach you what not to do. I had many bosses in my career because I started, like a simple engineer. And I learned as much from the managers or the leaders who were making a lot of things which shocked me, as from the people who were inspiring me. Both of them are very important. Why? Because the guy, who is your boss, and all of a sudden you say, well, he doesn't communicate well, I'm not motivated, etc. You're learning the basics, because you're going to always think every time when you're in leadership position, I don't want to become like X, Y, or Z who were my leaders. I want to make sure that I'm interesting, I'm sure I'm associating people, etc. So the mentors are positive and negative. You have the people who are going to teach you what are the mistakes not to do, and there are the people who are going to inspire you by saying, wow, I would have never thought about this, and I think this is very, very, very powerful. So you learn from both. And that's why it's very important to listen and observe. And some people say, I have a boring boss, I'm not learning anything. I say, no, wrong. You have a boring boss. It's an opportunity to see why he's boring. What other things, what other things I will learn that I will never have to do in the future, so I am not boring for the people who are in my team. If you have a great boss from the beginning, you're going to think it's very easy, because the guy is interesting and the objectives are being hit, etc. You're not going to learn as much as when you're going to be facing adversity from a boss who has a lot of imperfection. Obviously, if all your bosses are of this type, it's bad also, because you never know what is true north. So having some of both is very important. I was blessed by the fact that I had both, and frankly, I learned as much from one than from the others.
So while auto sales in the U.S. have remained flat or declined over the past few years, auto sales in many emerging markets continue to grow at a double-digit clip. How has this dynamic influenced Nissan and Renault, and how do you envision it impacting the global auto industry?
Well, that's a very important factor, because we all know that the car industry is moving from north to south and from west to east, in a kind of summary. The demand, obviously the United States, Japan, Europe are going to continue to be important markets, but I don't think growth is going to be an important factor in these markets. Growth is going to come from new markets. Obviously, we all know China, India, the Middle East, South America, but also from the country of the future, which are going to be the next wave coming. Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Vietnam, Mexico, some part of South America, maybe some countries in Africa. This is the next BRICS. And we have a short memory. I remember in the year 2000, 10 years ago, not so much, we used to sell 20,000 cars, 10 to 20,000 cars a year in China. China was maybe the number, in the car industry, it was market number 20 or 25. In 2009, it was the largest market in the world. And I think it's going to be sustainable. And we sold 700,000 cars in China in 10 years. And this is becoming one of the largest markets of Nissan. So today, what I want to know is, in 10 years, what are the countries that's probably not like China, but are going to see this tremendous growth. So you look at the potential, you look at the resources, you look at the population, you look at the mismanagement. Usually, the more the company is the more the company or the country is mismanaged, the more potential it has. Particularly, it has natural resources. So you look at the leadership, you look at the resources, and then you can start to list what are the countries which has the most potential for the next 10 years. Some of them will not realize it because mismanagement may continue or aggravate. But some of them are going to fix their problems, and then all of a sudden they're going to bloom. So for Renault Nissan, what we're trying to do is take all these countries which are the next generation of BRICS and trying to establish a presence in them. Some of them will not bloom, but the one who will bloom would be really worth it.
What advice would you give to newly minted MBAs, and what mistakes have you seen them make in the early stages of their career?
What advice I can give new MBAs? First, I think the first one is that don't plan too much. Doesn't work. For me, it didn't work, frankly. Don't plan too much your career, because what you're going to be facing in life is probably more powerful and much bigger than you ever imagined. So if you're following your plan, you may miss a lot of opportunity coming on the side, but you don't even look at them by saying, oh, I need to continue on my plan. Okay? Even though on the side, you're going to have a huge opportunity coming, you don't look at them. So don't plan too much, or be flexible on the planning. You're going to have a lot of opportunity, particularly in the period we're getting in, 2010, 2020. I think there's going to be a lot of transformation coming, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity, so be flexible. No matter where you start, you know, some of you have already jobs, some of you don't. No matter what you're going to start with, but if you really, really put your heart in it and your dedication in it, at the end of the day, you're always going to do great. I've never seen, personally, in my domain, anybody working very seriously, wholeheartedly, with a lot of motivation, openness on anything, and at the end of the day did not prevail. Never seen. It's a question of time. It's a question of patience, a question of drive. That's very important. The third thing is, it's also something very important. Don't work for recognition. It's an illusion. Somebody was saying, you know, if you want recognition, buy yourself a dog. I mean, don't work for recognition. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed. Work for yourself. Obviously, work for, no matter what are your objectives, if you want to become wealthy, if you want to, you know, I mean, work for yourself. Work for yourself. I'm not saying that means you need to be egocentrist and looking, no, but I think do not put too much emphasis on the outside, what the outside is going to bring you, because you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed. And I want to tell you why it's very important to hold this line. Because when you'll have to make hard decisions, and probably some of you will have in the future, you're going to be alone. Do not think that this is a team. No, it's not true. At the end of the day, the guy who's going to make the ultimate decision is one, and this guy is going to do it alone, and he's going to do it based on his own value and his own beliefs and his own analysis, transmitted by his team, but at the end of the day, he or she is doing the decision. And when you carry the decision, you're going to be bombarded no matter what. So if you're looking for an outside recognition, it's going to melt you down. You're going to say, oh my God, that means it's not working. Everybody, no. You need to have your own strength. You need to have your own beliefs, make your own analysis, and carry the decision. Let me give you an example. Obviously, I'm going to take the easiest one, which is the Nissan Revival Plan in 1999. When we announced the plan in 1999, October 1999, where we were announcing a lot of restructuring measures, a lot of tough decisions, obviously, the public opinion was a little bit shocked that it was too severe. The financial market applauded by saying, oh, finally, somebody, you know, doing what is right. But the share collapsed, 50%. The Nissan share went down. They didn't care. I mean, say, oh, it's too risky. You may not going to be successful, etc. So you're standing alone. You're doing what's right, with the public opinion upset, political parties upset, financial market letting you down, you know, and you're only with your employee in the dark, you know, and you say, okay, we're going to make it, and in 1 year we're going to be profitable, and 2 years we're going to be profitable. So if you're asking for recognition, you're in bad shape. You're in bad shape. I'm going to tell you, if you're asking recognition even when you succeed, because you can say, okay, after 1 year you made it, after 2 years you made it, etc. Now the glory, not at all, not at all, not at all. When we made the profit of Nissan in 2000, in 2000, in the first year was the year 2000, the press started to say, yeah, you know what, maybe cooked the book, you know. 2001, you repeat it, yeah, but it's easy to cut costs. It's different to grow the company. Now you start to grow the company, yeah, but where are the hits? You didn't do any car that now become very famous. Now you do a car very famous and say, hey, where's your technology, man? You're late in technology. Look at, you're gonna always have something wrong, always, no matter what, no matter what. So if you're looking for the outside things, you're gonna be a little bit misled. You need to have it in you and making sure that you're looking at the right indicator and looking at your own people.
Great. With that, we'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. Please raise your hand and wait for a mic before asking your question. So we have one here and one there.
Hi, Carlos. Thanks for being here. My name is Igor. Sorry for the jacket.
No, actually, I like your jacket, you know.
I am from Brazil, and I would like to. So we are hearing a lot about Brazil lately, and some people even consider that it is almost like a bubble, that is just too much hype around it. I would love to hear your perspective on the country and what are Nissan's and Renault plan for the country.
No, I think Brazil, it's a story which is long due. Long due. Brazil has a lot of potential. Obviously, I'm not talking out of emotion. I born in Brazil, I'm Brazilian, etc. But I think objectively, Brazil has a very big future, and frankly, it's coming late. The question is not it's a bubble. It's not a bubble. It's an anti-bubble. It has been a very long time that we should have seen what's happening today in Brazil, already in Brazil, because Brazil has everything. Every single thing, every aspect you looked at it, Brazil has it, you know. Good demography, young population, huge territory, all the resources, energy, I mean, technology, now, you know, democracy. I mean, it's an important element. I mean, this is a stable country, you know. Maybe still some mismanagement, etc. No, Brazil has a lot of potential. Frankly, this is not a bubble. And I think Brazil is really well below its potential. And for Renault Nissan, this is one of the priority market for us in terms of investment and in terms of penetration. Brazil is long overdue. What we're seeing today should have happened 10 years ago. I'm glad it's happening, you know, and I think there is more to come. There is more to come.
Okay, we have a question over here.
So we talked about the growth difference in emerging markets versus developed markets, and I'm wondering what's the implications do you see in the market dynamics in the auto industry overall, and do you see the companies, the local companies in those emerging markets as a threat, and how would you sort of set your strategy going forward? And also just like recently we've seen a number of Chinese companies acquire assets and foreign brands, and what's your view? Do you think it will be successful or not?
Okay, well, I think, you know, first thing, I think in the next 10 years in the global market, you'll have at least one large Chinese car maker, at least one, and you have at least one Indian large car maker. I have no doubt about it, and it's normal. You're going to have a shrinking of the Western, Northern car makers. They're going to come together and make alliances. And at the same time, you're going to have something generated. We don't know who, we don't know how, we don't know when, but it's coming. No doubt about it. That's number one. Number two, this will be facilitated, or the emergence of a big Chinese and the emergence of a big Indian, by how short-sighted the other car manufacturers are going to be. If we are short-sighted, we're going to have not only one Indian, but two. We're not going to have one Chinese, but five, etc. What does it mean? Very simple. I'm going to give you an example. When Ratan Tata came with the Nano, you know, a lot of comments said, this is a joke, this is not a car, etc., etc. No. That's a threat. If we neglect the Nano, we're going to have an Indian car maker coming with a new segment of the market, $3,000-$4,000 car that nobody's doing, and he's going to not only take by storm the Indian market, but start to develop into a lot of emerging market. And we're going to repeat the story of the Japanese industry versus European and US industry, and the Korean industry versus Japanese, which always start with, I bring a cheaper product, and then I move up. That's the story of the Japanese industry. You know, when the Japanese industry started 40 years ago, it started with cheap, small, low quality product, and it moved up. And today, it's a major part of the car industry with every single product. The Korean did the same. They came with a cheaper product than the Japanese and are moving up. Well, the Indians and the Chinese can do the same. And if we are short-sighted and say, yeah, you know, $4,000 car is not the market for me, I don't know how to do it, we're going to help generate more and more Chinese and Indian. So because of this, and because we've seen this threat now, what we're doing is we are allying with Indian and Chinese car makers to make sure that we're not going to be surprised by something like this. Okay? So this is going to slow down a little bit the emergence of a pure Chinese or a pure Indian. But still, I think it's very unlikely that you don't have at least one Chinese or at least one Indian who become global, eventually by acquiring assets or making alliances with other major company. But I don't think you're going to have many of them.
We have a question in the back.
Hi, thank you for your time. Brendan Milstein, second year MBA, joint with the engineering school. By going all electric with the Leaf, you're making a very different bet than either Toyota or GM is making. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how you see green cars playing into, like, as a % of your revenue in the future.
Yeah. Well, you know, the green car started with Toyota taking the leadership with the hybrid. They took the leadership on the hybrid. And then Honda came with the Me Too product, and Nissan came with the Me Too product, and then GM and everybody came with the Me Too product. But they have already taken the leadership technologically and in terms of brand by introducing the hybrid. That's fair. And with all the development of the hybrid, plug-in hybrid, mild hybrid, real hybrid, etc. The next step is zero emission. On the zero emission, we believe that there is a market, not on detriment of the hybrid. There is a market for hybrid, but there is a market for zero emission. We said, okay, we want to be the leader on zero emission. It's going to be good for our brand. We think there is a big market, and we have the technology for that. So I don't want you to think that we're doing zero emission and electric car on detriment of hybrids, because we have hybrids. But on hybrids, we recognize the fact that the leadership is already taken. Okay? We're followers. We're going to bring cars on the market. We're going to satisfy market demand. But we will never be recognized as leaders in hybrid. And in fact, nobody is going to take this out of Toyota. It's too late. We want to take the leadership on electric car, and we don't want anybody to take it from us, because we think objectively there is a specific market for electric cars. Why I think there is a specific market for zero emission cars and not hybrid and not anything else? 3 reasons, mainly. And in fact, 3 questions. If you answer yes to the 3 questions, then you say, okay, zero emission cars is going to be part of the future. The first question is, do you think, very simple, do you think, even though price of oil is unpredictable, do you think that there is more chance that price of oil in the future go up or down? Okay, so if you say yes, there is more chance that it goes up, well then you are on the right path for electric car. If you think, no, this is fake oil, there is plenty of it, and it's going to go down to $20, then even you should not even do hybrids. You should go back to gasoline engine. That's the first question. Second question, do you think that the constraints on environment and the regulation on the environment are going to become stricter or looser? If you say it's going to become stricter, CO2, emissions, etc., then you are also on the right path for the zero emission car, because it's going to cost you more and more to emit CO2. And this is something which is going to make a difference between this technology and the others. And the third one is more a strategic concern, which is how much all the countries which are developing in the world are importing oil, all of them. China, big importer of United States, obviously Western Europe, obviously Japan, obviously, but even China and India, which are the 2 powerhouses coming, They are big and net importers of oil, and there is no chance this is going to change for the next 30 years. So all these superpowers, economic superpowers, how long are they going to accept that their transportation sector depends only on one commodity and they are net importers of this commodity? I remind you that if one major oil producer, for whatever reason, decide not to export oil, and this happened in the past, the transportation system of most of these countries is paralyzed. That's why it's considered as a strategic issue. So the only way to disconnect this strategic issue is to bring electricity. Why? Because you can do electricity out of oil, of coal, of natural gas, of nuclear power, of hydroelectric, of wind, of solar. You can do electricity out of everything. So if there is one commodity which becomes very expensive or which become unavailable, you can switch to something else. You can't in the case of oil. So there are a lot of reasons for which, we think that there is absolutely no doubt that the zero-emission car are going to be part of the future. Now, the big question is it going to be 10% 2020, 15? Is it going to be 5? There is a lot of debate going on. We are the most bullish today by saying 10% of the market in 2020 will be zero-emission. Frankly, I think the numbers will move up. And all the people who are today, we think it's going to be 1%, 2%, 3%, they're going to make a kind of rolling forecast, which means every year they're going to update the numbers, So at the end of the day, you don't know what is their position. So we're going to discover at a certain point in time with 10%, we are probably the most conservative. It will take a very small crisis for all these numbers to change. It will take an environmental disaster. It will take an energy crisis. It will take a war in a country which is a large producer with some discontrol. So you're going to see these numbers is going to go up. And frankly, the likelihood that this happens in the next 10 years is, for me, probability is near 1. That you're going to have something happening. Even if it doesn't happen, it still makes a lot of sense. So we're going to see. We have different opinions. We're coming with different technology. It's not either or, We have our hybrids, but it is where do you put most of your resources in order to create leadership?
Okay. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Clay Calhoun. I'm an MBA 1. Before I ask my question, in the interest of full disclosure, I worked on the automobile task force at the Treasury Department this summer. And so I'd really like your perspective on broadly how you think the restructuring of the U.S. auto industry has changed or hasn't changed the game for Renault Nissan, and more specifically, returning to your comments on alliances, whether you think the Chrysler-Fiat alliance has a chance of success or is destined to kind of follow the previous alliances into problems.
Yeah, is there any journalist in the room or no? It can be on the website, so we have to be careful here. I'm sorry, we are on the website, so I'm going to have to be very polite and very. No, you know what? I read the comment of Steve Ratner, and in fact, it happened that I was in a debate with Steve Ratner 2 months ago in the Council of Foreign Relations. We were together, and Steve were very straightforward. He said. General Motors, we were not going to abandon no matter what, too much employment. Okay, so it was clear from the beginning. He said, I've never seen people who are so polite and so arrogant at the same time. His comments. No, you know this, you've been part of it. He said it on record, it's unfortunate, etc. And he said that never seen a company which has been as mismanaged and where there is so few sense of emergency. But, there is a new administration that could not let GM go because the employment, they calculated that the impact on employment was huge. They said we had to do everything we had to do to save General Motors. Okay. And frankly, I think it's very factual. Nobody in the industry, and I can tell you because I've seen many bankers and analysts, and they came to me, and this was before the collapse, 2 years before. Nobody would have predicted even in the wildest scenario and the wildest dream, that General Motors would become majority owned by the US government? No, nobody. Nobody has seen this scenario. Nobody. Okay? So, which means that we have to be very careful when we imagine the future, that it may always surprise us by what kind of solution are put into place. So this is for General Motors. For Chrysler, back to Steve Ratner, he said it was 49.51. No, it was 49.51. Do we let it go or do we give it to Fiat? His comment. And at the end of the day, he didn't say exactly how it happened, but probably inspiration is you have to let it, put it on the 51 and let's give it a try. The bottom line of this is the major element here was employment. The major element here was protecting activities. It was not so much about potential on the market or competitiveness of the companies. And frankly, it's totally normal because the French government moved to safeguard its industry because of employment. Japanese government moved and put a lot of cash and the liquidity during the dark days of the crisis in 2008 and 2009 because of employment. Everybody looked at the industry with the prism of these guys are big employers. We just can't let it go. So this being said, which means that the companies have been supported not in function of their merit or their potential, but because of how much damage this can create to the employment. In the industry, there is no impossible mission in our industry. And I'm really well positioned to tell you that. Because in 1999, nobody gave a clue about Nissan being able to survive, and we're doing very well. So I would not insult the future by telling you there is no chance. There is always a chance. Depends on how do you manage, how much focus you put into it, and you take the right decision. So I think it's still an open story.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Ghosn. Excuse the get up once again. Given the comments that you made about the differences between Nissan and Renault and the demands on a CEO's time and the fact that synergies can be achieved and have been achieved across companies in multiple different ways, it's not immediately apparent to me that having a single CEO is always the right choice. Why has that been an effective choice in this alliance?
Yeah, but I think you're totally right. I'm not going to tell you that a single CEO for two companies is the best choice. And by the way, when the alliance started, there was not one single CEO. Yeah, Louis Schweitzer was the head of Renault. Hanawa-san was the head of Nissan. I came as the CEO of Nissan. 2 years after, I became the CEO of Nissan. So Louis Schweitzer was heading Renault. I was heading Nissan. We were working together. In 2005, Louis Schweitzer wanted to retire. And obviously, he said, you should be my successor. Well, I'd say, yeah, but the problem is I'm not going to abandon Nissan. So how can you be successor and Renault if you don't want to abandon Nissan? Because I thought Nissan was still not completely, reestablished, even though the results were good, etc. So we came to the conclusion that I would manage both. Everybody thought it's crazy. How can you manage? I mean, two companies on two different guns, etc., etc. But I think this was the most reasonable solution, not in absolute term, but at least for the temporary period. When the crisis started, I was realistic enough to say, okay, you can't manage completely being the COO, the CEO, and the chairman of both companies at the same time. You can't. So I've given up the COO responsibility by nominating one CEO at Nissan and one CEO at Renault. Shiga-san is Chief Operating Officer based in Tokyo. Patrick Pelata is COO based in Paris. And they follow the day-to-day operation, and they make sure that nobody's going to say, you know what, where's the boss? We need an answer here. They're answering all the questions, connected with me. Okay? So I'm keeping CEO role and chairman of both companies and delegating to the CEOs. Is it going to be like this in the future? I don't think so. We can come back one day in a situation where you have two different CEOs and you have a kind of board of the alliance, which is chaired by one of them or a third person. So I don't want you to think that this is the only solution to manage the alliance. We have been very, very pragmatic into shaping it.
Over
Thank you so much for joining us today. I had actually had a similar question to the one that was asked by this young man here, and it's related to the role of the public sector and the government in the industry in the future. You were talking about oil, which is an adjacent industry, which 30 years ago was more than 75% privatized, but today is more than 90% owned by the public sector. And given what happened in the U.S. last year, and also given that in China it's very typical for the government to force foreign players to have some sort of local joint venture, I was wondering how you think that might affect the dynamics of the industry going forward in the coming years.
Well, you know, I personally was not shocked by what happened in 2008 and 2009. That means governments intervening, particularly to save employment. I was not shocked. I think it's normal. In a situation of crisis where there is no more rules, where whole system shut down, somebody's going to have to step, and the market cannot step. That means only government can step. And why they intervene with the car industry, they didn't intervene in other industries, just because we are big, large employers. That's it. I mean, the government were driven by the fact that they didn't want unemployment to go through the roof. That's a major motivation. They don't care about the cars. A lot of people, they don't care about us. I mean, you can say, okay, if I don't have a national producer, I'll have somebody else. I mean, in the United States, that would have me no problem to let one or two companies collapse, because we have so many already capacity existing and competitors that would be glad to take all these positions. Okay? The question was employment, and frankly, not only the US. And I think it's totally normal, and I was expecting it, and I think it's sound that we don't give the impression to society that there is a problem, there is a shock coming, and everybody retires or everybody hides. People have to stand up and face some of the problems. And I think they've done the right things, even though I'm not a public interventionist, I'm not a politician, but I think that what governments have done during this crisis were the right things to do. Because when this crisis hit, all the companies were hit, the good ones and the bad ones, the competitive ones and the not so competitive ones. Everybody was hit. It's like, you take an athlete and you take a sick person, you put them in a room, and you stop oxygen. Well, both of them are going to die. Maybe the sick guy is going to die a little bit faster than the healthy guy, but the healthy guy is going to die also if you don't reestablish oxygen. That's exactly what happened with the cash situation in 2008. We were all under threat. It was a question of time. Now, government cannot say, okay, we're going to let the market forces. What market forces? There was no more cash. The banks were not working. There is no market forces at all. You just have to reestablish common sense. So I think common sense was reestablished. Why some governments, it took them some time to react, because frankly, they did not understand what was going on. I personally spent a lot of time with authorities in Japan, with authorities in France, to explain what was going on. And frankly, this helps a lot for them understanding that this was not a manipulation, this was a real need. Federal government in the United States and the Fed reacted very well, because they started to listen to everybody. What's going on? Tell us is the cash reestablished or not? I think most of the job done in 2008 and 2009, there were mistakes, but overall the reaction was sound. But it's not visible today. Probably in 5 years down the road, when we analyze these facts, we would recognize the fact that many good things happened during this period. So back to your question, I'm not so favorable to public intervention into markets. But I think there are two cases where it's necessary. The first one is when there is no more rules. All of a sudden there is a collapse, okay? Government has to step in. It was the case 2008, 2009. The second reason is when you want to start something important. For example, I'm going to give a technological point. Batteries technology today is something which we know is essential for the next 20 or 30 years. The research on battery is mainly concentrated between Japan, Korea, and China. The US government, conscious of this, is saying this cannot be. We need to encourage development of research and development in the United States. And they are putting money in it and putting incentive and encourage company. That's part of the job government says you need to do. Recognize on a macro level that there is something big missing in the country and say, okay, we need to reestablish the incentive and the conditions to be able to bring back to the country. The Indian government is doing that. I was in India not very long time ago. I say, there is no battery company in India. India is proud, saying, we are the country of knowledge, we want to build it. Okay, that's great. Where is the battery technology? It's missing from India. And they are thinking about putting a kind of package to try to encourage company to go into this sector. This, for me, makes a lot of sense. These are the two main conditions on which you require governments to intervene and create the condition for the market to start and to perform.
Mr. Ghosn, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. That's for me. So this is my size. This is that's my size. Thank you very much. Thank you. Go this way?